Imagine standing in the middle of a windswept plain as shadows stretch across the horizon. Before you rise stones taller than houses, each weighing more than a fully loaded jumbo jet. They've stood for thousands of years, long before the wheel was invented, long before iron tools were forged, long before the world as we know it existed. Yet here they are, perfectly placed, aligned to the heavens with a precision modern engineers struggle to explain. Shift the scene. The desert of Peru, where lines etched into the earth form shapes so vast they can only be seen from the sky. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, drawn with a scale and geometry that rivals satellite mapping. And yet these lines were carved more than 1,000 years ago, by hands that supposedly had no way to fly. Now look to Egypt, where the pyramids pierce the desert sky. Their bases aligned to the stars, their stones cut so precisely that even a razor blade cannot slip between them. Scholars insist ramps and ropes built these wonders, but the evidence remains elusive. How could a civilization, armed with copper chisels and simple sledges, construct monuments that would still puzzle us in the 21st century? Across the world, forgotten scripts lie carved into stone, languages we still cannot read, stories forever locked away. What wisdom did they hold? What knowledge did they guard? Were they warnings, or memories of something humanity was never meant to forget? 50 mysteries, 50 enigmas scattered across continents, across cultures, across time. Each one challenges what we think we know about the rise of civilization. Each one refuses to fit neatly into history's timeline, and together they whisper a deeper truth: that our past is far stranger than we've ever been told. But what if the greatest puzzle isn't how these wonders were built, but why? Were they monuments of devotion, markers of the stars, or messages from another age entirely? One thing is certain: the deeper we dig, the more the contradictions pile up. The questions multiply, and the story of human history begins to unravel. But the deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. Our past is far stranger than we've ever been told. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell, because every mystery has a hidden side, and we're here to uncover it together. The story of human civilization is written in stone. Across continents and cultures, we find structures so massive, so intricate, that they appear to mock the limits of the societies said to have built them. These monuments are not just reminders of the past. They are challenges hurled across time, daring us to explain the impossible. Consider the pyramids of Giza. For centuries, they have dominated the desert horizon, rising with angles so precise that their bases align with the 4 cardinal directions almost perfectly. The Great Pyramid alone is composed of over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 70 tons. Egyptologists tell us they were dragged across the desert using wooden sledges, lifted with crude ramps, and set into place by armies of laborers. Yet no remnants of such ramps exist, and the sheer scale of the task stretches credulity. Even today, with cranes and lasers, replicating such precision would strain the best of our engineers. Why do the pyramids align with Orion's belt? Why do they encode measurements that echo the circumference of the Earth? Was this simply coincidence, or the fingerprint of a deeper knowledge? Thousands of miles away, in Lebanon's Baalbek, lies another enigma: the Trilithon stones. Each block is over 80 feet long and weighs more than 1,000 tons. To put that into perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 747. Mainstream archaeology suggests the Romans inherited and expanded the site, but no Roman text explains how these megaliths were moved. Some theorize ramps of unimaginable size were built. Others whisper of forgotten machines lost to history. The stones sit in silence, daring us to imagine the power it once took to shift them. Then there is Stonehenge, England's most iconic mystery. On its windswept Salisbury Plain, massive stones stand in circles that chart the movements of the sun and moon with uncanny accuracy. Archaeologists propose that the smaller blue stones were dragged nearly 150 miles from Wales, transported by sleds and rafts. But how could Neolithic builders, without wheels or beasts of burden, move stones weighing several tons across rivers and rugged landscapes? Why align them with solstices? Was Stonehenge a temple, a calendar, or something more? A cosmic code carved into the earth itself? Underground mysteries deepen further. In central Turkey lies Derinkuyu, an entire subterranean city carved into volcanic rock. Stretching 18 stories deep, it could house more than 20,000 people. Its tunnels, ventilation shafts, wells, and chambers are so sophisticated that they rival modern engineering. Archaeologists suggest it was a refuge from war or invasion. Yet no records explain who built it, or how such a colossal task was undertaken with simple tools. Was it a fortress, a sanctuary, or perhaps something even stranger? A shelter from cataclysmic events that erased earlier civilizations? Travel east to India, where the stepwells stand as monuments of both utility and mystery. Chanbauri, with its 3,500 perfectly symmetrical steps descending into the earth, appears more like an architectural illusion than a water source. Mainstream scholars credit medieval dynasties with their construction, yet the precision, geometry, and sheer scale suggest knowledge of advanced mathematics and design principles long before modern tools existed. Were these structures only about water, or were they symbols of a deeper cosmological order, built to reflect the very patterns of the universe? Across South America, the Andes conceal secrets etched in stone. At Sacsayhuamán in Peru, immense walls are composed of interlocking blocks so tightly fitted that no mortar was needed. Each stone has dozens of angles, yet they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. How were they carved with such precision, using only stone hammers, as archaeology claims? Local legends speak not of chisels and sweat, but of a liquid that softened stone, a forgotten technology now vanished. Further south, at Puma Punku in Bolivia, the mystery sharpens. Here, blocks of andesite are cut with straight lines, perfect right angles, and drill holes so precise they resemble machine work. The mainstream explanation is that skilled laborers with stone tools and copper chisels achieved this through patience and effort. Yet geologists note the hardness of the stone rivals granite. Could a Bronze Age culture truly achieve such accuracy without advanced tools? Or are these the remnants of a forgotten epoch, evidence of knowledge erased from human memory? Even Easter Island carries its own burden of impossibility. The Moai statues, some weighing more than 80 tons, were carved from volcanic rock and somehow transported miles across rugged terrain. Theories suggest wooden sledges or a walking technique using ropes. Yet many statues still lie half-buried, as if abandoned mid-task. Why were they built? Were they ancestors watching over the living, or something else, guardians of a knowledge too vast for us to grasp? From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of South America, from the plains of England to the depths of Turkey, one theme emerges again and again: impossible scale, impossible precision, impossible endurance. The explanations offered by mainstream archaeology lean heavily on manpower, patience, and crude tools. Yet gaps remain, contradictions linger, and every answer seems to open new questions. Alternative theories arise like shadows at the edges of history. Some speak of lost civilizations, wiped from memory by catastrophe, who left behind only these monuments as whispers of their existence. Others propose advanced technologies, now forgotten, that allowed ancient builders to cut, move, and shape stone with ease. And then there are the boldest voices, who suggest the knowledge came from beyond, from celestial visitors, from unknown teachers who once walked among us. Each theory is dismissed by academia, yet none can be fully disproven. The stones remain, unmoved, unyielding, silent witnesses to a past we may never fully understand. They ask us the same questions over and over. Who built us? How? And above all, why? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not the engineering, but the purpose. Were these structures temples, tombs, calendars, or messages? Were they built to honor gods, to track the heavens, to safeguard knowledge, or to warn of disasters yet to come? The answers remain hidden, but the sense of awe endures. Standing before these giants, you feel the weight of time pressing down, a reminder that human history may not be the straight line we've been taught, but a broken cycle of rise and fall, with each age leaving behind its impossible monuments. And yet, these stone giants are only the beginning. The earth itself hides secrets that no blueprint can explain. If stones are the monuments of human strength, then writing is the monument of human thought. Across the world, scattered fragments of ancient knowledge lie etched in clay, carved in wood, painted on vellum. Messages from our ancestors, waiting to be understood. But many of them remain sealed in silence. Scripts we cannot read, codes we cannot crack, maps that should not exist. And together, they form a picture far stranger than the textbooks allow. Begin with the Indus Valley, one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. Around 4,000 years ago, the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro thrived with advanced sanitation systems, planned streets, and thriving trade. Yet the people's voice, remains locked behind the Indus seals. Tiny stone carvings etched with symbols that have never been deciphered. Scholars have tried for decades to decode the script, suggesting it could represent a language lost to time. Some argue it isn't writing at all, but symbolic marks. But if it were mere decoration, why would it appear so consistently across thousands of artifacts? What knowledge hides in those unreadable lines, laws, myths, histories, or warnings? Half a world away, on Easter Island, another riddle emerges. The island's famed Moai statues stare toward the horizon, but the real enigma lies in the wooden tablets covered with mysterious glyphs, the Rongorongo script. No one has ever translated it. The few surviving tablets suggest it may have recorded genealogies, rituals, or cosmic events. But how did such a remote island, isolated by thousands of miles of ocean, develop its own script? Some theories suggest cultural borrowing, others propose independent invention. But what if it was something else? A fragment of a much larger global tradition of knowledge that has since crumbled into silence. And then, there is perhaps the most infamous book in the world, the Voynich Manuscript. Discovered in a European library, this 240-page codex is filled with strange illustrations, plants that don't exist, naked figures bathing in interconnected tubes, star charts, and an untranslatable script. Linguists, cryptographers, even military codebreakers have tried to unlock its secrets. Some claim it's an elaborate hoax. Others believe it encodes alchemical knowledge, lost sciences, or even messages from another civilization. Every page feels like a taunt, as if its author wrote not to reveal truth, but to hide it from us. But the mystery of ancient knowledge goes beyond languages. It reaches into the very shape of the world. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis compiled a map that stunned later researchers. Drawn on gazelle skin, it appears to show the coastlines of Africa, South America, and, most controversially, Antarctica. But here is the paradox. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, 3 centuries later. And even stranger, the map depicts the continent not covered in ice, but ice-free, with detailed rivers and mountains. Modern geology tells us Antarctica has been buried under ice for millions of years. So how could a 16th century cartographer record a coastline that no human should have seen? Mainstream historians suggest Piri Reis drew on older maps, now lost, passed down through sailors and explorers of the ancient world. But where did those source maps originate? Could there have been an advanced seafaring civilization, long before the rise of Greece or Egypt, with knowledge of the globe rivaling our own? The Piri Reis map is not alone. The Oronce-Finet map of 1531 also shows Antarctica free of ice. The Waldseemüller map of 1507, named America before Columbus's voyages, had truly reshaped Europe's understanding of the New World. The Zeno map of 1380 shows Greenland and parts of North America with uncanny accuracy. Over and over, fragments appear, suggesting that someone, somewhere, knew far more about the Earth than they should have. Skeptics argue that mapmakers often guessed, borrowing shapes and coastlines from rumor, legend, and sailors' tales. That errors and coincidences can explain the anomalies. But is it coincidence when Antarctica, a frozen desert hidden at the bottom of the world, is drawn with accurate contours centuries before exploration? Is it accident when medieval maps chart longitudes and latitudes with a precision supposedly impossible without modern instruments? Perhaps these anomalies point to something larger. Remnants of a knowledge system inherited from a forgotten epoch. Plato spoke of Atlantis, a great civilization lost to flood and fire. Could such a culture have existed, passing fragments of its science to later peoples, encoded in maps and manuscripts? And if such knowledge was inherited, why does so much of it feel hidden, suppressed even? Some theorists suggest that throughout history, elites guarded fragments of forbidden truths. That knowledge of the true age of civilizations, of lost continents, of cycles of cataclysm, was deliberately concealed to maintain power. After all, knowledge is control. If humanity were to realize that its story stretches back far beyond the official timeline, how many pillars of authority would crumble? There are hints, always hints. The Dogon people of Mali, who spoke of the star Sirius B long before it was confirmed by telescopes. The Mayans, whose calendars track cosmic cycles with staggering precision. Medieval scholars who drew maps suggesting continents beyond their world. Are these coincidences, or surviving strands of a tapestry we've only begun to glimpse? Each undeciphered script, each anomalous map, feels like a crack in the facade of history. Mainstream archaeology fills those cracks with convenient theories, hoaxes, errors, coincidences. But the cracks keep widening, and through them, we glimpse something vast and unsettling. The possibility that human civilization has risen and fallen more than once. That knowledge has been discovered, lost, and rediscovered, in cycles spanning tens of thousands of years. What would it mean if that were true? It would mean the story of humanity is not a steady march from primitive caves to modern skyscrapers, but a fragile dance where memory fades and each age must learn or forget what came before. It would mean the secrets of the Indus seals, the Rongorongo tablets, the Voynich Manuscript, and the Piri Reis Map are not isolated riddles, but fragments of a lost library, scattered by time. And if we've already lost so much, how much more remains hidden, locked in sands, sealed in ice, waiting in libraries mislabeled as nonsense or hoax? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not that we cannot read these codes, but that we were never meant to. If ancient scribes recorded knowledge we can't even decode, what else lies buried, waiting for us to rediscover? History is not only carved in stone, sometimes it lies buried in the earth itself, in bones that should not exist, in skulls that defy anatomy, in genetic traces that whisper of forgotten peoples. These discoveries tug at the very fabric of human origins, suggesting that our family tree is more tangled, more mysterious than textbooks dare admit. For centuries, stories have circulated about giant skeletons unearthed across North America. Old newspaper archives from the 19th and early 20th centuries tell of farmers and explorers stumbling upon enormous bones, skulls with double rows of teeth, femurs so large they dwarfed normal human proportions. Some accounts came from the Ohio River Valley, where burial mounds once dotted the landscape. Mainstream archaeology insists these reports were exaggerations, hoaxes, or misinterpretations of large but ordinary skeletons. Yet the sheer volume of such reports, spanning decades and appearing in reputable publications of their time, continues to haunt researchers. Were they all fabrications, or do they point toward a chapter of human history quietly erased? Travel south to the windswept desert of Peru, where another mystery emerges: the Paracas Skulls. Discovered in the 1920s, these elongated skulls stretch far beyond what natural human variation allows. Archaeologists explain them as products of cranial deformation, a practice where infants' skulls were bound with cloth or wood to elongate their shape. And indeed, many cultures practice such rituals. But some of the Paracas skulls are different. Their cranial volume is larger than normal, their sutures arranged in unusual patterns. DNA studies have hinted at anomalies, though results remain inconclusive. Were these simply humans practicing extreme rituals of identity, or evidence of a distinct lineage, one that modern science hesitates to recognize? Then there are the Denisovans, a mystery hidden not in folklore, but in our very blood. First identified in a Siberian cave through a finger bone and a tooth, these ancient humans were neither Neanderthal nor Homo sapiens, but something else entirely. Genetic studies reveal that Denisovans interbred with our ancestors, leaving traces of their DNA across Asia, Australia, and even the Pacific. Yet what did they look like? How far did they roam? How much of their culture was absorbed into ours? Mainstream science admits that we know almost nothing, but legends of giants, of sky beings, of strangers bearing gifts of knowledge. Could these myths be echoes of encounters with species like the Denisovans, long forgotten except in story? Ancient art complicates the picture further. Across Mesopotamia, carvings depict beings with wings and helmets, towering over mortals. In Mesoamerica, gods descend from the skies, carrying knowledge of agriculture and astronomy. Egyptian reliefs show hybrid figures with animal heads and human bodies, guardians of hidden truths. Mainstream scholars dismiss these as symbolic myths, stories meant to explain nature, not history. Yet why do cultures separated by oceans tell such similar tales of beings who came from the sky, who walked among humans, who shaped civilizations? Were they metaphors or memories? In Native American traditions, stories of the Star People abound, beings who descended from the heavens, interacted with tribes, and sometimes even intermarried. The Dogon of West Africa spoke of gods who came from Sirius, bringing cosmic knowledge. Polynesian legends recall sky canoes and visitors who taught navigation by the stars. Again and again, myths converge on a single theme: humanity was not alone. Mainstream anthropology places these accounts in the realm of metaphor. But inconsistencies remain. If myths are mere imagination, why do they echo so consistently across continents and millennia? If giant skeletons are only hoaxes, why do so many accounts describe the same details? Unusual dentition, extraordinary size, burial in mounds. If elongated skulls are only rituals, why do some specimens defy the physical limits of human anatomy? Perhaps the problem is not the evidence, but the narrative. For if giants once walked the earth, if hybrid beings once mingled with humans, if forgotten species once carried knowledge across the globe, then the tidy story of human evolution fractures. It no longer becomes a linear ascent from ape to man, but a tangled web of encounters, extinctions, and suppressed truths. Some propose that these anomalies hint at deliberate erasure, that in humanity's deep past, other species or civilizations rose, rivaled, and fell, and that traces of them were buried, literally and figuratively, to protect the dominant narrative. Others suggest that what we call myths are actually encoded memories of real encounters, passed down in symbolic form until their meaning blurred with time. And then there are those who whisper of something stranger still, that humanity was never alone on this planet, that gods and giants were not divine fantasies, but visitors, whether terrestrial or otherwise, who left their mark on both our DNA and our myths. Standing before these mysteries, one question looms: how much of ourselves have we forgotten? Bones crumble, but stories endure. Skulls may be locked in museums, but the legends live on in every culture, waiting for us to recognize their echoes. Perhaps the giants of old were not fables. Perhaps the star people were not metaphors. Perhaps our past was populated by beings, human, almost human, or more than human, that history has chosen to forget. And if the bones of forgotten giants once walked this earth, then perhaps our greatest myths are not myths at all. From the first flicker of firelight, humans looked upward. The stars weren't just lights scattered in the black. They were calendars, teachers, gods, and warnings. Every ancient civilization, no matter how far apart in distance or culture, carved stories of the skies into their stones, temples, and myths. But when we examine those myths closely, when we decode those alignments with modern tools, a startling realization emerges. Ancient people may have known more about the cosmos than we are comfortable admitting. Take the Great Flood. A story so universal it appears in Sumerian cuneiform tablets, Hebrew scripture, Native American oral traditions, and even in the myths of the Pacific Islands. Was this just symbolic storytelling? Or was it the record of an actual cataclysm? An ancient memory of a world nearly washed away? Geologists acknowledge that sea levels surged at the end of the Ice Age, swallowing vast tracts of land. Could the flood myths be the fading memory of that planetary trauma, passed down generation after generation? Cataclysm wasn't the only obsession. Across the globe, stone monuments align with precision to solstices, equinoxes, and celestial risings. At Stonehenge, midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset pierce directly through its colossal arches. In the Yucatan, the Pyramid of Chichen Itza creates the illusion of a serpent sliding down its staircase during the equinox. At Machu Picchu, the Intihuatana stone casts a perfect shadow only during solstices. These alignments suggest not random construction, but an obsession with tracking cosmic time. But why? Were these monuments giant clocks designed to warn of cycles, of disasters destined to repeat? Then there is the strange case of the Dogon tribe in Mali. For generations, their oral traditions spoke of Sirius, not just as a star visible to the naked eye, but as a system containing a companion so small and so dense it was invisible. Sirius B. Western astronomers only confirmed Sirius B in the 19th century, long after the Dogon had already embedded it in their cosmology. Where did this knowledge come from? Scholars argue that perhaps Europeans shared the detail with them earlier, and it seeped into their myths. But there's no concrete evidence of such contact. If not from modern astronomy, then from whom or what did they inherit such precision? The Mayan calendar provides another riddle. It wasn't just a way to count days, it was a cosmic cycle machine, mapping vast stretches of time with eerie accuracy. It anticipated eclipses, tracked Venus's motion, and counted out world ages that rise and fall like clockwork. How could a jungle civilization, without telescopes, chart planetary rhythms with such exactitude? The mainstream insists they simply observed for centuries and encoded those results. Yet even with lifetimes of careful watching, how did they manage to predict with such long-range precision? The calendar doesn't just measure time, It hints that time itself moves in repeating cycles of creation and destruction. At Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, the world's oldest known temple, massive stone pillars over 11,000 years old are etched with animals, symbols, and alignments. Researchers suggest that its layout mirrors constellations, and some argue its carvings may even record a comet impact around 10,800 BCE, an event many geologists now link to the Younger Dryas, a sudden global cooling that ended the Ice Age and devastated early human populations. If true, Göbekli Tepe is not just a temple, it's a warning left by survivors at the very dawn of civilization. And here lies the unsettling thread weaving these mysteries together. Myths and monuments often seem less like random stories or primitive rituals and more like messages. Messages from a time when humanity lived under the shadow of cataclysm, encoding their trauma in stone and story so that the future might remember. What if the tales of floods, sky gods, and fire from heaven were not allegories but archives? What if civilizations rose and fell before ours, leaving behind only fragments disguised as myth? The possibility casts a shadow over modern certainty. Because if these stories hold truth, then our institutions, our schools, our museums, our governments are either blind to it or deliberately hiding it. Why would knowledge of cycles of destruction be hidden? Perhaps because acknowledging them forces us to admit our own fragility, that our civilization, no matter how advanced, may not be eternal, that we are not standing at the pinnacle of progress but on the edge of another cycle. Look again at the alignments. Look again at the myths. They whisper of suns that shift, of skies that burn, of waters that rise without warning. They whisper of knowledge preserved not for worship, but for survival. And yet, how many dismiss them as fairy tales, irrelevant to the modern world? But if the ancients left us warnings written in stars and stone, perhaps the greatest mystery is whether we'll heed them in time. Across the sweep of this journey, we've walked among impossible stones, traced forgotten codes, stared into the sockets of skulls that don't fit the human mold, and listened to myths that whisper of stars, floods, and cycles of destruction. Each puzzle, on its own, unsettles the story we're taught, but together, they suggest something far more profound: that human history is not a straight line of progress, but a fractured mirror reflecting civilizations lost, knowledge erased, and truths carefully hidden in plain sight. The pyramids still rise from the desert, aligned with the stars in ways no simple ramp theories can fully explain. Baalbek's foundation stones, weighing more than a jumbo jet, sit as though placed by hands immune to gravity. And in the shadow of those impossibilities, mainstream explanations sound less like answers and more like patchwork attempts to cover a silence no one wants to admit. The same silence stretches across undeciphered codes and maps. The Indus Valley seals remain mute, as though taunting us with a language from a world we no longer understand. The Rongorongo tablets carry messages no one can unlock. The Voynich Manuscript, filled with drawings of plants that don't exist, reads like a transmission from another age, or another species. Then come the maps that show Antarctica free of ice, or coastlines centuries before discovery. Skepticism insists these are coincidence, mistakes, or copies of copies. Yet the unease lingers. How did they know? Bones and beings only deepen the shadows. Giant skeletons rumored across North America, elongated skulls in Peru, and the elusive Denisovans, glimpsed only in fragments of DNA, suggest that the human family tree is less tidy than textbooks imply. And still the myths endure. Gods descending from the skies, giants walking the earth, hybrid creatures carved in stone. Are these echoes of ritual imagination, or fossils of truths too inconvenient to survive into modern classrooms? Then we look to the heavens, where myths and alignments converge. Göbekli Tepe, older than history itself, may encode the memory of a comet strike. The Dogon knew of a hidden star before any telescope revealed it. The Maya mapped cycles of time so vast they stretch far beyond empires. These fragments are not isolated curiosities. They are part of a pattern, civilizations that watched the skies, encoded warnings, and perhaps carried knowledge handed down from a past even they could barely remember. Science tells us to seek answers through evidence, and yet, how often does it turn away from questions that might upend its narrative? The tension between curiosity and authority is older than history itself. Skeptics dismiss mysteries as coincidences, errors, or hoaxes. Believers see them as proof of lost civilizations or otherworldly contact. Between these extremes lies the fertile ground where true discovery begins. Maybe humanity has risen and fallen in forgotten cycles, with each collapse burying not just people, but the memory of what came before. Maybe fragments of knowledge survived, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, passed down like sacred fire until their origins were forgotten. Or maybe, just maybe, visitors walked among us. Not gods, but teachers from another branch of intelligence, human or otherwise, leaving behind just enough to haunt us with their absence. The unifying thread through it all is awe at what our ancestors built, knew and recorded, awe at what still lies unsolved, or at the possibility that we are not the first, nor perhaps the greatest, to walk this earth, and awe at the silence that surrounds these truths, as though the universe itself conspires to keep them just beyond our reach. So, what are we to do? To accept the official story? Neat and convenient, closing the book on questions that don't fit? Or to remain restless, to keep tugging at the loose threads, to demand more from the story of us? Curiosity is not comfortable. It rarely provides closure, but it is the engine of discovery, the only force that keeps the past alive and the future open. Because maybe these mysteries are not meant to be solved easily. Maybe they are meant to remind us of our fragility, to keep us humble, to warn us that we, too, are part of a cycle larger than we can imagine. And maybe, just maybe, they are meant to beckon us onward, toward truths still buried, waiting for hands bold enough to uncover them. In the end, perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not what we've lost, but why the truth keeps slipping through our fingers.